Katherine Mary Knight, Australian abattoir worker, stabbed her lover. She then removed his skin and cooked his head in a pot and served up his body parts. Catherine's family was originally from the town of Aberdeen in New South Wales Hunter Valley. Barbara Ruffin began a relationship with Ken Knight, a co-worker of her husband Jack Ruffin. The Ruffin and Knight families were both well known in the conservative rural town, and the affair was a major scandal. Two of Barbara and Jack's 4 children remained with their father, while the 2 youngest were sent to live with an aunt in Sydney. Katherine was the younger of twins born to Barbara and her de facto partner Ken on October 24, 1955 in Tenterfield, New South Wales. Jack Ruffin died in 1959, and the 2 children who had lived with him moved in with the Knight family. Barbara's grandmother was apparently an Indigenous who had married an Irishman. She was proud of this fact and liked to think of her own family as Aboriginal. This was kept a family secret, as there was considerable racism in the area at the time, and this was a source of tension for the children. Apart from her twin, the only person Katherine was close to was her uncle Oscar Knight, who was a champion horseman. She was devastated when he committed suicide in 1969 and continues to maintain that his ghost visits her. The family moved back to Aberdeen the same year. Katherine's father Ken was an alcoholic who openly used violence and intimidation to rape her mother up to 10 times a day. Barbara in turn often told her daughters intimate details of her sex life and how much she hated sex and men. Later, when Katherine complained to her mother that one of her partners wanted her to take part in a sex act she didn't want to do, Barbara told her to put up with it and stop complaining. Katherine claims she was frequently sexually abused by several members of her family, though not by her father, which continued until she was 11. Katherine was by all accounts a pleasant girl who experienced uncontrollably murderous rages in response to minor upsets. When she attended Muswellbrook High School, she became a loner and is remembered by classmates as a bully who stood over smaller children. She assaulted at least one boy at school with a weapon and was once injured by a teacher who was found to have acted in self-defense. By contrast, when not in a rage, she was a model student and often earned awards for her good behavior. On leaving school at 15, without having learned to read or write, she gained employment as a cutter in a clothing factory. 12 months later, she left to start what she referred to as her dream job, cutting up offal at the local abattoir, from where she was quickly promoted to boning and given her own set of butcher knives. At home she hung the knives over her bed so that they would always be handy if I needed them, a habit she continued, until her incarceration, everywhere she lived. In Aberdeen she was renowned for offering armed combat to anyone who upset her. She married David Kellett in 1974, at her request, with the couple arriving at the service on her motorcycle with a very intoxicated David on the pillion. As soon as they arrived, Katherine's mother Barbara gave David some advice. "The old girl said to me to watch out. You better watch this one or she'll fucking kill you. Stir her up the wrong way or do the wrong thing and you're fucked. Don't ever think of playing up on her, she'll fucking kill you." And that was her mother talking. She told me she's got something loose, she's got a screw loose somewhere. On their wedding night, Katherine tried to strangle David. She explained it was because he fell asleep after only having intercourse 3 times. The marriage was particularly violent, and on one occasion a heavily pregnant Katherine burned all David's clothing and shoes, before hitting him across the back of the head with a frying pan, simply because he had arrived home late from a darts competition after making the finals. In fear for his life, David fled before collapsing in a neighbor's house, and he was later treated for a badly fractured skull. Police wanted to charge Katherine, but she was now on her best behavior and talked him into dropping the charges. In May 1976, shortly after the birth of their first child, Melissa Ann, David left her for another woman. The next day, Katherine was seen pushing her new baby in a pram down the main street, violently throwing the pram from side to side. She was admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital in Tamworth, where she was diagnosed with postnatal depression and spent several weeks recovering. After being released, she placed 2-month-old Melissa on a railway line shortly before the train was due, then stole an axe, went into town and threatened to kill several people. A man known in the district as Old Ted, who was foraging near the railway line, found and rescued Melissa, by all accounts only minutes before the train passed. Katherine was arrested and again taken to St. Elmo's Hospital, but, apparently recovered, signed herself out the following day. A few days later, she slashed the face of a woman with one of her knives and demanded she drive her to Queensland to find David. The woman escaped after they stopped at a service station, but by the time police arrived she had taken a little boy hostage and was threatening him with the knife. She was disarmed when police attacked her with brooms and she was admitted to the Morisset Psychiatric Hospital. She told the nurses she had intended to kill the mechanic at the service station because he had repaired David's car, which had allowed him to leave, and then kill both her husband and his mother when she arrived in Queensland. When police informed David of the incident, he left his girlfriend and along with his mother, they both moved to Aberdeen to support her. Katherine was released on August 9, 1976 into the care of her mother-in-law and along with David, they now moved to Woodridge, a suburb of Brisbane, where she obtained a job at the Dinmore Meatworks in nearby Ipswich. On March 6, 1980, they had another daughter, Natasha Marie. In 1984 Katherine left David and moved in, first with her parents in Aberdeen, then to a rented house in nearby Muswellbrook. Although she returned to work at the abattoir, she injured her back the following year and went on a disability pension to no longer needing to rent accommodation close to her work. The government gave her a housing commission house in Aberdeen. She met 38-year-old miner David Saunders in 1986. Katherine's ex-husband's name was David too, so do not confuse this one with another. A few months later David moved in with Katherine and her two daughters, although he kept his old apartment in Scone. Katherine soon became jealous regarding what he did when she was not around and would often throw him out. He would move back to his apartment in Scone and then she would invariably follow and beg him to return. In May 1987 she cut the throat of David's 2-month-old dingo pup in front of him for no more reason than as an example of what would happen if he ever had an affair before going on to knock him unconscious with a frying pan. In June 1988 she gave birth to her third daughter Sarah, which prompted David to put a deposit on a house, which Katherine paid off when her workers' compensation came through in 1989. She decorated the house throughout with animal skins, skulls, horns, rusty animal traps, leather jackets, old boots, machetes, rakes and pitchforks. No space, including the ceilings, was left uncovered. After an argument where she hit David in the face with an iron before stabbing him in the stomach with a pair of scissors, he moved back to Scone, but when he later returned home found she had cut up all his clothes. David took long service leave and went into hiding. Katherine tried to find him, but no one admitted to knowing where he was. Several months later, he returned to see his daughter and found that she had gone to the police and told them she was afraid of him. They issued her with an apprehended violence order against him. In 1990 she became pregnant by a 43-year-old former abattoir co-worker, John Chillingworth, and gave birth the following year to a boy they named Eric. Their relationship lasted 3 years before she left him for a man she had been having an affair with for some time, John Price. John Price was the father of 3 children when Katherine had an affair with him. Reputedly a terrific bloke, liked by everyone who knew him, his own marriage had ended in 1988. While his 2-year-old daughter had remained with his former wife, the 2 older children lived with him. John was well aware of Katherine's violent reputation and she moved into his house in 1995. His children liked her. John was making a lot of money working in the local mines and, apart from violent arguments, at first, life was a bunch of roses. In 1998 they had a fight over John's refusal to marry Katherine, and in retaliation she videotaped items John had stolen from work and sent the tape to his boss. Although the items were out-of-date medical kits that he had scavenged from the company rubbish tip, John was fired from the job he had held for 17 years. That same day he kicked her out and she returned to her own home while news of what she had done spread through the town. A few months later John restarted the relationship, although he now refused to allow her to move in with him. The fighting became even more frequent and most of his friends would no longer have anything to do with him while they remained together. In February 2000, a series of assaults on John culminated with Katherine stabbing him in the chest. Finally fed up, he kicked her out of his house. On February 29, he stopped at the Scone Magistrates Court on his way to work and took out a restraining order. to keep her away from both him and his children. That afternoon John told his coworkers that if he did not come to work the next day, it would be because Katherine had killed him. They pleaded with him not to go home, but he told them that he believed she would kill his children if he did not. John arrived home to find that Katherine, although not there herself, had sent the children away for a sleepover at a friend's house. He then spent the evening with his neighbors before going to bed at 11 p.m. earlier that day. Katherine had bought new black lingerie and had videotaped all her children while making comments, which have since been interpreted as a crude will. She later arrived at John's house while he was sleeping and sat watching TV for a few minutes before having a shower. She then woke John and they had sex, after which he fell asleep. At 6 a.m. the next morning, the neighbor became concerned that John's car was still in the driveway, and when he did not arrive at work, his employer sent a worker to see what was wrong. Both the neighbor and worker tried knocking on his bedroom window to wake him, but after noticing blood on the front door, alerted the police, who arrived at 8 a.m. Breaking down the back door, police found his body with Katherine comatose from taking a large number of pills. She had stabbed John with a butcher's knife while he was sleeping, according to the blood evidence. He awoke and tried to turn the light on before attempting to escape while Katherine chased him through the house. He managed to open the front door and get outside, but either stumbled back inside or was dragged back into the hallway, where he finally died after bleeding out. Later, Katherine went into Aberdeen and withdrew $1,000 from John's ATM account. She then methodically proceeded to skin the corpse, taking off the entire skin, including the face, ears, scalp, and neck like a macabre suit. Katherine only left a small inch square of skin on the body. The square had the scar from where she had stabbed him previously. The suit of skin, something harking back to the thriller Silence of the Lambs, was then hung up in the entranceway of the house. The skin was removed so expertly. Katherine had worked in the abattoirs as a meat slicer for many years and had planned to use her skills to remove the skin of John the way she did. Katherine then continued to defile the body of her lover by chopping of the skinned head and cooking it in a big pot on the cooktop. Serving up the meat with baked potato, pumpkin, zucchini, cabbage, yellow squash and gravy in 2 settings at the dinner table, along with notes beside each plate, each having the name of one of John's children on it. She was preparing to serve his body parts to his children. A third meal was thrown on the back lawn for unknown reasons, and it is speculated she had attempted to eat it but could not, and this has been put forward in support of her claim that she has no memory of the crime. John's head was found in a pot with vegetables. The pot was still warm, estimated to be at between 40 and 50 degrees Celsius, indicating that the cooking had taken place in the early morning. Sometime later, Katherine arranged the body with the left arm draped over an empty 1.25-liter soft drink bottle, with the legs crossed. This was claimed in court to be an act of defilement demonstrating Katherine's contempt for John. She had left a handwritten note on top of a photograph of him, blood-stained and covered with small pieces of flesh. There were many spelling mistakes in this note. This was the note: "Time got you back, Johathan, for rapping my doubter. You to Beck, John's daughter, for Ross, for little John, his son. Now play with little John's dick, John Price." In parentheses, sick. The accusations in the note were found to be groundless. John's autopsy revealed that he had been stabbed at least 37 times, in both the front and back of his body, with many of the wounds extending into vital organs. Katherine's initial offer to plead guilty to manslaughter was rejected, and she was arraigned on February 2, 2001 on the charge of murdering John, to which she entered a plea of not guilty. Her trial was initially fixed for July 23, 2001, but was adjourned due to her counsel's illness, and it was refixed for 15 October 2001. When the trial commenced, Justice Barry O'Keefe offered the 60 jury prospects the option of being excused due to the nature of the photographic evidence, which 5 accepted. When the witness list was read out to the prospects, several more also dropped out, after which the jury was impaneled. Katherine's attorneys then spoke to the judge, who adjourned to the following day. The next morning, she changed her plea to guilty, and the jury was dismissed. It was now made public that Justice O'Keefe had been advised of the plea change the day before. He had adjourned the trial and then ordered a psychiatric assessment overnight to determine if she understood the consequences of a guilty plea and was fit to make such a plea. Her legal team had planned to defend her by claiming amnesia and dissociation, a claim supported by most psychiatrists, although they did consider her sane. One of Australia's leading criminal psychologists, Dr. Milton, was asked to discuss his findings after interviewing Katherine. Dr. Milton said that Katherine suffered from borderline personality disorder, but knew exactly what she was doing on the evening of February 2000. No reason has ever been given for the guilty plea, and despite giving it, she still refused to accept responsibility for her actions. At the sentencing hearing, her lawyers requested that Knight be excused to avoid hearing some of the facts, but the application was refused. When Dr. Timothy Lyons, forensic pathologist, took the stand and described the skinning and decapitation, Katherine became hysterical and had to be sedated. On November 8, Justice O'Keefe pointed out that the nature of the crime and Katherine's lack of remorse required a severe penalty. He sentenced her to life imprisonment, refused to fix a non-parole period, and ordered that her papers be marked never to be released, the first time that this had been imposed on a woman in Australian history. In June 2006, she appealed the life sentence, claiming that a penalty of life in jail without possibility of parole was too severe for the killing. Justices Peter McClellan, Michael Adams, and Megan Latham dismissed the appeal in the NSW Court of Criminal Appeal in September, with Justice McClellan writing in his judgment, "This was an appalling crime, almost beyond contemplation in a civilized society. Her crime was the vicious murder and defilement of the body of her de facto husband John Price." The murderous plan was decided when John Price called the police on the Sunday before his death, following an argument with Katherine and taking out an apprehended violence order against her. She was not a woman to cross. Ex-lovers and family members came forward at the murder trial to explain the violence that the woman was capable of. She was portrayed as a vindictive and cruel woman who harmed everyone who crossed her. Yet to look at her sitting in the dock during the trial, many commented that she looked like anyone's mother. A meek and mild-looking woman who hid the facade of a monster. She enjoyed the killing. As the Justice O'Keefe, presiding over her trial, claimed, "The last minutes of John Price's life must have been a time of abject terror for him, as they were a time of utter enjoyment for her. She has not expressed any contrition or remorse, and if released she poses a serious threat to the security of society. She took time and painstakingly defiled the body of her lover. Her pure enjoyment of killing and torturing the dead body put her down as one of the cruelest in the annals of Australia's criminal history." She is currently 68 years old and imprisoned at the Silverwater Women's Correctional Centre in New South Wales. Okay, guys, this was the end. Hope you enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.